This is the IaCT film, the improvement and correction time for the Year 7 baseline test that students have just undertaken. It's a test to determine what students already know and how we should prioritise how we teach the skills in the first half term. The only real aim of this assessment is to determine what the students know, for the students to identify their strengths, their weaknesses, and to build upon them, and then we will test again, a second baseline test, at the end of the skills unit to revisit and see if progress has been made. So, as students work through, the policy of the school is that students would make their corrections in green pen. So as you go through, feel free to pause, rewind, go back and make those amendments on the sheet if you are undertaking this task. So the first task was one of looking at the language that we use to describe time, the skill of chronology. Time has to be measured. We use these certain terms. These are the basic ones that we want students to understand. The word on the left, the definition on the right. You may not be familiar with the term CE and its use with AD. It's becoming increasingly common for the term Common Era to be used rather than AD, to take religion out. AD meaning in the year of our Lord. If we remove the Christian element and make it more secular, some people wish to use the CE term, the Common Era. The two terms, AD in the year of our Lord and CE Common Era, they are interchangeable. And the other definitions there are provided. BCE becomes before the Common Era. Still measured from the birth of Christ, but again, it's an alternative secular way of expressing that measurement of time. Question 2 is chronology. Again, a skill that some students have an initial grasp of, another one that other students don't. We try and teach it and relate it as closely to maths as is possible, but we work on this assumption of history being a line, and we measure everything from the year 0. Everything from the year 0 moving forward in time to the present day. This is an AD year or an CE year. And as we move forward from the birth of Christ, the numbers get bigger and larger, and will continue to as they move further into the future. These could be viewed as positive numbers. As we move backwards in time from the year 0, our numbers are BC or BCE numbers, or negative numbers become bigger. In visualizing this line, it becomes possible for students to measure the time between BCE and CE, BC and AD year groups. So this idea of a line, having students stood still, put both arms out in the shape of a T. As you look to your left, you are looking further into the past, and your dates will get bigger. As you look to the right, you're looking towards the future. You're working from year 0 up to the present day and beyond, and the numbers get bigger. Our third question was on the language to describe sources, most basic terminology being the difference between primary evidence, which is from the time, and secondary evidence, which is not from the time. So a bone of a dinosaur would be a primary piece of evidence if you were studying the dinosaurs, whilst Jurassic Park would be a secondary piece of evidence because it was not from the time, it was not contemporary. Our fourth skill to be introducing is that of inference. Inferences are a basic question in history exams. They carry only 4 marks. They're expected to be able to do 2 inferences in 5 minutes, and the format always takes this style. The source that students will look at can be both written and a picture. In this case, it's a picture of Victorian slums. Students will need to make an inference, an educated guess or assumption. If it is a picture, your inference cannot be something you see. It has to be an educated guess or an assumption. If it was a written source, your inference cannot be something that is written in the source, because again, that is comprehension. So one way in which we always get students to prompt them to be thinking about inferences is to be thinking about emotions linked to a source that aren't mentioned, or the tone of a source that isn't mentioned. So for example, one could look at this picture and make the inference that there are an awful lot of people in the picture, therefore I can infer that Victorian slums were densely populated. Details in the source that tell me this: there are lots of people in the picture. What I can infer is that it was a miserable scene. Details in the source that tell me this: it's dark, it's dingy, no one's smiling. And students are expected to make 2 inferences in 5 minutes. Then we move on to the skill of nature, origin and purpose. NOP. It's one of our key phrases that we develop in Year 7, the other one being PEA, which we aren't testing in this particular piece of work. NOP. Nature, origin, purpose. Nature, what is the source? Origin, who wrote it, when and where? And finally, purpose, why was the source produced? Sources in history, as you would have seen on the previous picture, will always come with information in bold, which we will call the provenance. That's the information about the source. And then your source in this case is a text piece of source. Nature, what is it? It's a book. Origin, again, that is provided here. And the purpose, you have to make that educated guess. There may be more than one purpose, so you have to make an educated guess or an assumption as to why Tacitus was writing a history book about Rome. So, for example, the purpose could be education. It could be to inform future generations. It could be to make the Romans feel very good about being Romans. And finally, question 6, a quote that we want students to interpret. The final baseline assessment is the students to look at their performance in the test and identify their targets. These are commitments that students are making to us to get better at.